All right, we're live. Okay.
Here we go.
Hey, here we go. Hey, everyone. If anyone's watching, welcome to Every Other Monday. Woo! I'm Amanda,
Hi, Mike.
and this is just a test run to see if technology works and is on our side, and Mike and I are capable enough to figure it out. So,
So really what this is because we don't just talk every other Monday, we talk every Monday and most other days. Pretty much this is like us having a conversation, but with more people.
exactly. So now we've invited three of the coolest women on the planet to talk with us and enjoy. And essentially, what Every Other Monday is going to be is it's kind of a platform where we can talk about a bunch of issues and topics that have been plaguing or kind of pertinent in the industry. We kind of have found that there's not really a forum for people and chefs and food people involved to kind of discuss hot topics besides like big conferences. Obviously, there's been a lack of just communication and connection in general because of the pandemic. So this is
Including no big conferences.
including no big conferences. So this is kind of a solution, and we'll invite chefs and food persons from different calibers and universes to come here and discuss and cross paths. And we're going to start today. And we picked Monday because that's industry day. Usually everyone's day off if you're lucky.
Yeah, it's also our most productive day of the week.
So. Yeah, Monday is definitely the most productive day of the week. And our topic that we want to discuss today is about staging. And for those tuning in who aren't familiar with staging, I'll say what I think it is, and then you can say what you think it is. So for me and my perspective, staging is free labor in turn for learning and experience. And my mentors have told me that staging is like school. And you essentially work for free and you are paid in knowledge and for being allowed to be there.
Yep.
And that can take a million different forms, right?
Well, I think that's well said, but I think staging is to cooking what interning is to most creative professions. I think it's generally understood that to get into things like, whether it's, for me, it was food writing, there's sort of an understanding you're going to work for free or for low cost in order to sort of get your foot in the door, to not only learn, but also to maybe see if it's for you. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. So, and I think easy to judge this from the outside looking in, but also there's some issues with it too. So that's why we're here today.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's up for debate as labor laws have kind of come into the forefront and new labor practices, which all have a positive intention, kind of leaves this practice in peril of extinction. So, yes.
And we will not be going deep into labor laws. So
no, that's for another day.
Yes.
That's for another day. And let's see if I can figure out how to bring all of these people in. Will you guys uncamera yourself or recamera yourself? That's a new verb, recamera. Let's see. How do I bring you in? Do I drag you? Oh, here we go. Yay. Wow. This is a good powerhouse of women. So, guys, thanks so much for joining us. I think we should start, if you don't mind, just kind of introduce. This is super casual, by the way. This is a total test run. Maybe my mom is watching and like a couple members of our team. So no need. Camille, you look clean. Esther, yellow is your color. Elise, matching the headphones to the shirt. We're just going to have a chat. So I think the best way to start is kind of if you guys just introduce yourself and kind of say what your perspective on staging is or what your experience is. It can be like a one sentence thing. It doesn't have to be aggressive. Lisi, you're up.
Hi, my name's Elise. I know Amanda from when we worked at Pantry together. To me, staging is everything that both of you said it is, but I also think of it as a really useful, interactive, day-long interview for getting a job. And I'm talking more about the one-day stage that you do before you are hired or not hired, not an extended intern program. And I actually met both Camille and Amanda on one-day stages. And while I think there's a lot to unpack with them and they're problematic in some ways, they also have been super helpful for me in getting to know a restaurant and getting to know kitchen teams that I'm considering working for.
Cool. Camille?
So I'm Camille Cogswell. I recently moved from Philly back to North Carolina, where I'm from, and but I was working in New York City after culinary school, and then Philly, and moved up from being a cook to a chef there, and so have been on both sides of being, the person who is staging for a job and also the person who is having stages come in for to, in terms of typically for a one-day thing to see if they are a good fit for a position that we are hiring for. And I have seen the model change over the past couple of years, especially in the restaurant groups that I have worked in. It has always been unpaid labor. And then I have also seen some restaurants and heard of restaurants in Philly who are starting to pay for stages. So I've done mostly one-day stages in my time, but for instance, some places won't accept one-day stages. So like when I was coming out of culinary school and I really wanted to stage at WD-50, but they wouldn't accept any less than a 5-day stage. And so I had to kind of figure out how to make that work with my school schedule. And yeah, so I've kind of seen it from across the board of its many forms.
Esther?
I'm Esther. I work at Momofuku Co.
What are you? What are you?
I just took over as exec chef.
Woo!
So, very recent, thank you. Yeah, I'm a huge supporter of staging. Both as like a cook growing up in the industry and wanting to just learn everything. It's kind of hard to learn everything from one kitchen. And sometimes you're not ready to leave your home kitchen yet. So I used to stage every chance I could get, like on my days off. There are definitely issues with it when it's taken advantage of. But I mean, staging, even when you go abroad, I think it comes into play when you take a tourist visa and you're trying to make the most out of it and you're trying to learn overseas. You come back with knowledge that isn't readily available in the States. I don't know, I could keep going on, but I'll stop there.
You will. And I'm so with you. And just to talk about like the tourist visa with my own experience, like I too, just like you guys said, like I staged every chance I got. And I actually did a 4-month long stage in Italy and was totally unpaid, but they paid for they like put me up in an apartment. So even though I had to pay for my flight and any activities I did, and I felt like I was still learning. I was so grateful to be there. And part of me gets really sad that I don't think that opportunity is going to exist anymore for a lot of people. And Esther, you mentioned being taken advantage of, and I was just wondering, what do you think that kind of looks like? Have you seen it? What does that appear?
I mean, I think it's really easy for restaurants to accept these stages and have them come in and not teach them. And that could easily just be like getting shoved in a corner and picking herbs for literally 2 months. And when you're abroad, I think that's easier for that to happen because there are language barriers and sometimes it's hard to teach people when you can't verbally communicate with each other. So it's easier to just show people how to pick herbs a certain size or show people how to do certain knife cuts instead of getting into complicated techniques that actually require language to communicate through. But yeah, I mean, it's happening. There was that whole issue, not to bring up like controversial things, but the whole issue with Willow's Inn, Willow's Inn with like, this happened like 4 years ago, I think. There was a cook that I was working with at Co who was part of the settlement package, but him and like, I don't know, like a handful of other cooks had been working for nothing.
And do you feel like this is mostly a problem with like long-term stages? I mean, I feel like, you know, like the single day staging as an interview process and the long-term staging or like internship style are two different kind of issues and circumstances, but they're connected in a lot of ways. And right, the term comes from, it's like French, and traditionally it meant a long period of time, or at least not like a day, right? But do you feel, Esther, like also, you know, that the where it's taken advantage of is mostly in the long term and not the short?
I think so. I think the 1 day stages, I mean, as a company, Momofuku doesn't do stages. We will formally hire everyone and pay everyone for their, even if they're like coming to trail for a job, they're not actually hired yet. They'll go through the whole paperwork process just because we are such a big company. But the 1 day trails, for me personally, like, I think it's more so for that individual than it is for the restaurant. And I think
it goes both ways. I really like it for both ways.
So just me asking a question, since I'm the lone human on this call who doesn't answer to the word chef. Sounds like we're talking about the long-term staging, which is akin to an internship, like you would find in a lot of creative professions, essentially working for free to get your foot in the door, versus the 1 to 5 day stages. Is that like an interview to get your foot in the door, or is the expectation after the 1 day stage that you're doing that because that's how you get hired, or is it literally come pick herbs for 1 to 5 days?
As far as I have experienced it, both as someone looking for a job and someone, or on 3 levels, someone one looking for a job, someone looking to just learn something new for fun, even if you already have a job and you're not looking for a job. Mm-hmm. And then as a manager looking to hire staff, I mean, like I wouldn't ask for resumes or anything. Like anybody who wanted to apply, the first thing was just, let's see when we can get you in here, we can meet in person and we can work together for a few hours so I can see how you work, you can see how we work, and we can decide if this is going to be a mutually positive experience for you to get hired here. And so it has been really pretty essential in the process of, you know, as a cook deciding whether, getting to see into the inner workings of a restaurant and either getting really excited by it or being like, I don't want to work here. And you don't know that until you do it, right? Like you could go through a seated office interview, but not know what it's going to be like to work in that kitchen. And on the other side of things, you know, you could get a really good impression from somebody or a really poor impression from somebody just sitting down and asking them questions. But when you can see how they operate themselves and handle themselves in a kitchen, no matter what their skill level, you can tell what, you know, even if they don't have skills, the way that they handle themselves and their eagerness to, and maybe you're, you know, showing them one way to do something and you help them adjust what they're doing a little bit and they either take your direction or don't. There's no other way to really tell if they're going to be someone that is, hireable.
Right.
Totally. And something that I've seen that's makes me sad is as someone who would have one day off a week at times, and I would go stage anywhere that would let me in. I went to Prune and all these places that I feel so lucky, because I really think if your eyes are open and you care, you can learn a lot in a day. Just seeing how a kitchen is physically set up. Like when I think about opening a restaurant, I'll have spent one day in Prune, but I'm like, oh, I love their hotline, how they have this there and that there. Like, I'm going to do that. And I would never have thought that if it wasn't something I got to see in the action. But more and more, you call places for a stage and they will say that they don't accept stages anymore, in part because they will have to pay you. And people don't want to do it anymore, which financially makes sense for a lot of restaurants.
Yeah. I also, one thing that in thinking about this topic before we got on here, I think staging is pretty crucial, and I don't think it should be done away with, but I do think that, it's a certain type of person that is often able to do that, able to take an entire day out of their schedule to work for free, to look for a job. And if you're unsuccessful in, if you have to do that to a bunch of places and you don't have a steady, if you need a job or you have to take days out of your job to go do these stages, you have to have the means to be able to take that time out of your schedule. And I definitely sympathize with this conversation of how staging should be moving forward in terms of accessibility to people who might not otherwise have the means to be able to just work for free for a whole day.
I totally agree with Camille on that. And I think that if you're using the stage as an interview as a way to really get into a restaurant, learn about them, see how they operate. And one thing that I want to add to that is meet the team, because working in a kitchen is such a team sport, and you want to make sure that you're going to mesh with the fabric of the team. And if you're really using the stage to shop around for the right fit, you might have to spend 2 weeks staging at 10 or 12 or 14 different restaurants before you find the perfect fit. So it can be super prohibitive to some people. I think that day-long stages I love them. I've had really great times at them, and I've also had really bad times at them at restaurants that I was excited to go visit. So it's, as Camille said, super crucial. But I think where it gets into even stickier territory is when you're kind of like brought into a job and expected to work for pay, but then you're expected to keep working after that clock goes off. And when you're misled almost.
Is that common?
I think that
that's a common. You mentioned like the situation where being expected to work for free beyond what you're being paid for. Is that a pretty common practice in kitchens?
I think it's changing, but I think certainly a lot of restaurants do things like that.
Oh yeah. I mean, Elise and I grew up in a culture that if you weren't there at 10:30 in the morning, even if you clocked in at 1 p.m., like you were frowned upon. You were the odd man out. That's been in every single kitchen I've ever worked in, though.
I've actually never worked in a kitchen that did it that way, but I know that it is not uncommon.
And I guess that doesn't count as staging, but I think it's free labor, and that's part of the discussion of staging that we're having.
So, and again, this is, I don't know this as intimately as you guys, but I remember 10 years ago visiting a friend in Spain who had just spent a while staging at Mugaritz and then was a sous chef there for a while, and meeting all these people. I mean, it was like this really formal program where people would go over there and live and work. And internationally, I mean, is this when we talk about dodging being something that is becoming less common or the culture of it is changing? Is that in America, or is that an international conversation as well? And are there restaurants here or abroad that you guys think are just like have taken this and evolved it into a place where it still works for where it's working better for everyone?
I know. There are programs that do, like Mentor BKB is one of those programs that offer grants for people to go abroad and stage, and it comes at no cost to the restaurant itself, but Mentor will fundraise to provide these grants for applicants. There are other places like, where is it? Like Restaurant Mirzur in Menton, France. They have a staging system where they provide room and board at the restaurant. You work for free, but you get the experience of a lifetime. And I don't know, I feel like the labor laws like abroad are kind of like, if you can find your way over, they'll take you in. I think it's more within the States that it's becoming this huge issue. Yeah.
When I was in Italy, we were at this moment when it was so touchy to have unpaid stages or foreign workers that, like, on my first day, I was told, like, you need to be, if the Department of Labor walks in, like, you need to hide. Like, it was like going through this moment where it was so illegal, and they were trying to really crack down on the input of foreign workers, even if we weren't technically being paid. But Esther, you had a pretty interesting experience in Australia and Japan, just to brag for a second.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I did a month at Den in Tokyo. And there were people coming in and out of those doors. Like at any given point, there were probably two people staging there for however long. They'd be in and out. And then, I mean, Restaurant Esther was a little different in Sydney. There weren't that culture didn't really exist down there. But yeah, I feel like everyone wants to go to Japan and get into one of those kitchens, and they don't care that you're not being paid. And I don't know if that's a mentality that exists within those cultures. Because in Korea, it's impossible to get into kitchens.
My question for you guys is something Mike and I were talking about the other day, was like, if all of these stages and all of these interns at these really fine dining restaurants, Le Bernardin and Noma and Per Se, if they were actually being paid, the price of the meal would inherently skyrocket. And he said that he had a friend who was talking about how expensive Le Bernardin was, and in his head, he brought this up to me, and I was like, yeah, it's true. If every stage at Noma who was there picking herbs and being paid, like, these meals would totally increase in price. So what, as future participants in this system, like, what do you see as a sustainable answer to this? Like, do people just need to pay more for food so we can pay these people to cook? Like, what is a solution or direction we should try and head in?
Well, I also think that, like, if they had to pay each of those people, they wouldn't have that many people. Like, they would find more efficient other ways to do the things that they're doing. And they wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things they're doing without that much labor, but they're doing really labor intensive food that wouldn't be possible without such a large labor force, and they wouldn't be able to pay that large labor force without some people working for free. From CIA, I interned at Blue Hill Stone Barns, and I was provided, there was like an intern house like a quarter of a mile from the property, and so we were provided room and board, but worked for free. And I mean, I had a really incredible experience, but I know that they also, and that was like 8 or 9 years ago, but they in recent years for how many? I mean, like there are an equal number of interns to employees there. It's insane. And they just wouldn't, there's almost like too many people. It's like almost seems like it would be more of they are able to do a lot of really cool things, but I think that there is something to be said for like cutting back and making things a little bit more, not increasing the price for the diner, at least to the extent like pulling both things a little bit. Like food, the price of food I think does need to increase a little bit. I don't want to see it increase that much though, because then like the people who are not making a lot of money, that with this giant wealth gap that we have, and wealth inequality is just getting like bigger. I still want like food to be affordable for people who don't make a lot of money to still be able to go out to eat, especially the people who work in the restaurants. If they can't afford to like go out to eat, that's a huge problem, I think. But I think there really needs to be a lot of more kind of legal support for restaurants so that they don't have to be the ones to make that decision that either they're going to have to increase the price of food or not be able to pay their people enough money. So, bringing a whole different topic into it, but I don't think it should have to be the restaurant's choice to either pay people or raise the price of food,
That brings up I think you mentioned not changing the topic, but it seems to be the root of a lot of these questions is the restaurants and small business often become these little wedges for these issues that are so much bigger, than another issue is healthcare. I've talked to a lot of my chef friends about, their desire to provide healthcare for everyone, but also most of these countries, mentioning Japan, mentioning, all the European countries, having to provide healthcare for employees is not something small businesses in other countries do because government does it. And, I think this broader question of what is fair and what isn't fair, I think, Camille, when you step back and you look at the whole kind of ecosystem of it, it becomes a lot more clear that, these aren't always restaurant issues. So that's a really good point. Not to get political or anything.
No, but I do feel like, this is a huge thing during the pandemic too. Just about how much stress the restaurant industry has been under for forever. But it's basically, just making it clear that everybody's just kind of like, hey, restaurant owners, fix your issues. And it's just impossible with the current system and the margins to be able to offer that to your, you want to treat your employees well, but with the margins and the labor costs, it is just impossible. And wanting to treat your employees well and like being able to is often not like, you can't connect those dots very well. And I think it's truly like, people just expect, both the government and the customers expect that the business should be able to make those changes. But when you truly look at the structure that it's in, there has to be like some more support behind the whole system and the government for the restaurateurs to be able to make those good decisions.
Yeah, totally. And I think the pandemic has kind of blown the lid off of some of this stuff that a lot of people didn't know before. And I'm curious because hopefully this will be I hope anyone who opens something now moving forward will use this as like a jump start to put these issues in the forefront, because a lot of people didn't even know that they were issues to begin with, or how much us as chefs and cooks make and how little the profit margins actually are. And we'll have to see how this whole thing unravels. But I keep telling all my friends and the people who I'm talking to on a daily basis about people who are trying new things and using this as a springboard to, like, now's the time to try and talk about it and input any big policies, whether it's no tipping and including gratuity in, or I think it's an interesting time to kind of take all these conversation points and like put them in, because the pandemic kind of opened the door a little bit. Awesome.
I think the pandemic did, as you said, blow the lid off of all of these issues, but I think it's also kind of forced individuals and workers to really reassess their relationship with work and have a reckoning about how much their time is worth and whether or not the current model for the restaurant industry is sustainable. And I think a lot of people don't think that it is sustainable, so it will inevitably have to change. And I guess that's what we're talking about, figuring out what that looks like. But I know.
Yeah, we'll go for like another 5-10 if we just.
No, all good. All good.
Go ahead.
Wait, what's coming? Yeah, no. Same with media. It's kind of the same thing. You know, there's all these stories about kitchens, and then there's all these stories about media. And you know, one of the things that was said earlier about equality, like getting your foot in the door in food media, it's also expected that you work for free or almost nothing, which means you end up with, oftentimes, not everyone has the ability to do that. And it doesn't help that publications just happen to be located in cities that are big media markets like LA or New York or London or Paris, and are really expensive. So, you know, it's the question, you know, how do you make the table longer? How do you make the door bigger? How do you get more people in that door? I mean, those are important questions.
And Elise, to pick up on what you were saying, you guys all did some type of like freelance or private work during the pandemic, right? You did your own thing in one way or another. And I myself did as well. And for the first time, like, you have to kind of, not for the first time, but you have to learn how to value your time when you come up for prices, whether it's teaching a virtual cooking class or delivering meals or doing farmers market stands. It's like you have to come up for a monetary value of what you think your time is worth. And chances are it's a lot more than what you're being paid in restaurants. If you're being paid what you're making for an hour of a Zoom cooking class, like, our lives would all look a lot different. And I think that's definitely a point of reckoning, as you mentioned, Elise, where people are kind of just stepping back and being like, what is my time worth? And I think that's important.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of gets far away from staging, but it's all connected. I think it's how much is my time worth? And like, this is off topic, but work-life balance. I mean, I think we got a slice of that in the pandemic. And I don't know, personally, I aspire to have a work-life balance in the future. And I think in certain restaurants, that's really hard to do.
Definitely.
Well, you guys, thank you for being part of our first Every Other Monday.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're all the best.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're all beautifully eloquent, and it was great to see all your faces.